The most expensive bottle of wine ever sold is a 1945 Romane Conti from Domaine de la Romane Conti, which went for $558,000 at auction in 2018. If you acquired this bottle, you could of course just leave it in a cellar somewhere as a prized possession, but if you decided it was time to uncork and consume it, a modest glass from that bottle would be worth about $93,000. Every sip you took from that glass would be worth about $9,000. I'm not sure what it would be like to taste a $9,000 sip of wine, but I cannot imagine that it would taste good enough to feel like it was worth $9,000. And if you open a $558,000 bottle of wine, you will almost certainly want to finish it. And when you're done, $500,000 will simply be gone as if it never existed. Of course, the buyer of this particular bottle of wine was Robert Rossini, a billionaire real estate developer. And the equivalent of him spending $558,000 on a bottle of wine is roughly equal to an average American buying a $50 bottle of wine. That math sounds like it can't possibly be true, but it is. At a certain level of wealth, you are fully living on a separate plane of reality from the vast majority of humans. A reality where you have to actively search for creative new ways to spend your money, or in some cases, invent new ones. The Romane Conti is the most expensive bottle of wine ever sold, but it is not the most expensive bottle of alcohol ever sold. That honor goes to the Emerald Isle, a 30-year-old Irish single malt whiskey that sold in 2024 for $2.8 million. Sold as a set, it includes the whiskey itself in a custom crystal decanter, a handcrafted walnut presentation chest, a bespoke Fabergé Celtic egg containing an emerald, a one-of-one Fabergé timepiece, 2 Cohiba cigars, and a handful of other accessories. But while this set does technically hold the record for the most expensive verified sale of a bottle of alcohol, the reality is a bit more complicated. But we'll get back to that a little later, because while these dramatic objects of luxury, expensive things to drink, expensive things to eat, expensive things to wear, expensive squares of canvas to hang on your wall, are certainly fascinating, they aren't the first thing I think of when I think of luxury. There is a YouTube video that may have inadvertently altered the course of my life. The $21,000 first-class airplane seat by Casey Neistat. Today, videos like these are fairly common on YouTube, but 9 years ago, something like this felt so novel it was almost impossible not to click on. The video is shot in Casey Neistat's signature, highly engaging style. A style that would come to define an entire era of YouTube, and a style that would inspire me and many others to give YouTube a try. With 80 million views, this video is far and away Casey's most popular, and it's how I first discovered his channel. And his next 2 most popular videos are also about expensive airplane seats. In my view, these 3 videos are far from Casey's best work, but they have the most views. They have the most views because everyone is addicted to fantasizing about luxury. If you were a duke living in England's Blenheim Palace in the early 1800s, you would have lived in one of the most magnificent homes in all of Europe. You'd be waited on hand and foot by dozens of servants. Each day, you'd find yourself surrounded by gilded ceilings, towering marble columns, stunning gardens, and lush grounds as far as the eye can see. You would have lived a life many magnitudes more comfortable than virtually every other human alive on planet Earth during that time. But if you needed to use the bathroom, your choice was likely a chamber pot. Food, especially meat, was often borderline rotten by the time it reached your plate. If you got sick, there were no antibiotics or anesthesia. You might instead find your doctor turning to leeches and bloodletting. Your life expectancy was 50, maybe 60-something years if you got lucky. No air travel or central heating or air conditioning, no endless supplies of hot water, no video games, no television, no internet, no electricity. Pointing out that an average American today lives better than almost every king and queen from previous eras of human history is often used as a blithe retort to someone complaining about some inconvenience of modern life. A little perspective can, of course, be a good thing, but you don't have to feel happy while you're stuck in miles of traffic simply because a couple hundred years ago people were rattling around in rickety horse-drawn carriages. It's worth appreciating the fact that if you're watching this video, you most likely live in a climate-controlled home with hot water and indoor plumbing, and multiple screens all capable of showing you unlimited amounts of every imaginable type of entertainment. But it's hard to shake the knowledge that while you're debating if you want to go with the cheap beer or spend a little more on a craft six-pack, someone else somewhere might be cracking open a $500,000 bottle of wine with barely a second thought. It's hard to shake the knowledge that while you're fighting your way through a sweaty airport only to finally board a flight in which you are sandwiched in the middle seat between two ogres, someone else is stepping out of their Rolls-Royce Phantom and directly onto the Celestial Star VIP Design BBJ 7779, a luxury cabin designed by Lufthansa and built atop the Boeing Business 777 class of private jets, which currently boast the largest cabin in business aviation, and the range to cover the entire globe flying nonstop to any location. It features a king-sized bed, a bathroom with a shower that would put many spas to shame, office, conference room, bar. A private jet like this makes Casey Neistat's $21,000 seat look pedestrian in comparison. Private jets not only give you the luxury of space and privacy, they also give you the luxury of convenience. No need to be tethered to commercial airline schedules, you simply get to fly where you want, when you want. Depending on your worldview, you might ask the question, should these things even exist at all? Should private citizens be allowed to accumulate the staggering amount of wealth necessary to, in the extreme case, afford not one but 3 private jets? And realistically, 3 is not even the maximum number of jets Jeff Bezos could afford to own. It's just the amount he decided he currently wants to have. It is very hard to deny at this moment in time that wealth inequality, especially here in America, is a problem. Many people will tell you that the billionaire class is essentially the root of all evil in the modern world. And while I believe that is an oversimplification, it's certainly true that billionaires are the root of some evil. Bernie Sanders has stated that billionaires should not exist. Taken literally, it's easy to get hung up on how this would work in practice. 999 million is fine, but no one is allowed to have any more than that. But Bernie's message is more of a moral and structural critique about the US economy as a whole and the mechanisms that allow such a lopsided accumulation of wealth at the top of the pyramid. Whether you agree with Bernie, in part or in full, it seems unlikely that America will implement a tax structure that puts a hard cap on people's wealth anytime soon. Of course, you don't actually need $1 billion to own a private plane. That's possible when you reach upwards of 100 million, and chartering private flights without being a full owner is possible at several levels below that. Although, if you did want a fully outfitted Boeing 777, which can cost upwards of $400 million, you probably would need to have achieved billionaire status. For the sake of argument, let's imagine a world where private jets are effectively banned except for in very rare circumstances. Maybe the environmental cost alone justifies prohibiting them. In this new world, no matter how wealthy you are, you still have to share flights with other people. Although you would probably still get to have a fancy first-class seat, and if you are important enough, some extra room for a security detail to travel with you. But no separate plane. If this came to pass, it seems like most people on Earth wouldn't be too upset by it, because most people on Earth go their whole lives without flying on private jets. Maybe it's kind of fun to know they exist because they allow you to fantasize about a day when you might someday get to fly on one, but I don't think there would be too many tears shed over that. One consequence of this hypothetical law would be that the market for private jets would very quickly collapse, and the executives who run the private jet industry would have to find something else to do. Maybe they'd choose to do something that is more of a net benefit to humanity at large, but more likely they'd pivot to some other luxury industry. For example, luxury watches. The Patek Philippe Grandmaster Chime Reference 6300 is a pretty crazy watch. A unique stainless steel variant of this watch set the record for the most expensive watch ever sold in 2019, at a cool $31 million. In watch lingo, it has 20 complications, 5 of which are chiming functions, meaning that there are 3 gongs and 3 hammers within the watch. It can chime on the hour and quarter hour, the Grand Sonnière setting. It can be set to chime only on the quarter hours, the Petite Sonnière setting. The watch face can be swiveled to reveal a full calendar with a perpetual year, month, day, date, and a leap year indicator. This calendar even chimes the date, in case that was something you also needed. Now, I'm not a watch guy, per se, but the Grandmaster Chime is undeniably an amazing feat of craftsmanship, which, according to Patek Philippe, took more than 100,000 hours to develop, not to mention the centuries of watchmaking history required to reach this point. As cliche as it sounds, this watch and all its painstakingly perfected details is a testament to human achievement. At the same time, wearing a multi-million-dollar watch, or just collecting multi-million-dollar watches if you're understandably hesitant to wear them out in public, certainly ranks up there as a way to simply flex on everyone with less money than you. Luxury watches do not inhabit the same space as private jets. They don't allow you to travel the world in peerless comfort. While they do technically provide the function of telling time, for all intents and purposes, they are simply very expensive pieces of jewelry. And when you reach the point where these pieces of jewelry are worth more than many mansions, it's logical to once again ask whether they should even exist at all. Maybe it would be better if only a few Grandmaster chimes were ever made, not to be sold as luxury goods, but rather to be exhibited in galleries where watch aficionados of various income levels could all come to marvel at them. To be fair, Patek Philippe actually does have a museum in Geneva that you could visit if you're so inclined, but that's a little beside the point. Like private planes, it stands to reason that luxury watches primarily exist because there is a market for them, and if people didn't have the disposable income to spend on extremely expensive watches, very few expensive watches would actually get made. Perhaps there would still be devoted artisans out there putting together intricate timepieces simply for the love of the craft, but it would be a much different landscape without the audience of prospective buyers. It's interesting to contemplate a world where the pursuit of the finest craftsmanship is not tethered to the pursuit of money. But that would represent a dramatic shift from basically the entire history of human civilization, because virtually all our great works of luxury and decadence have required the existence of the ultra-powerful and the ultra-wealthy. St. Peter's Basilica is easily one of the most incredible spaces I've ever been inside. The sheer scale, the level of detail, the paintings, the statues. I'm not Catholic, but stepping into this place, it is hard not to feel a sense of reverence. Constructing St. Peter's Basilica was not cheap. It was actually insanely expensive and took more than a century to finish. To help pay for it, the church leaned hard on selling indulgences, basically certificates that supposedly cut down your time spent in purgatory if you donated enough money. The aggressive sales campaign, especially in Germany, blew up into a scandal that ultimately became a key factor in setting off Martin Luther's Protestant Reformation. A reformation that was in many ways a direct response to the perceived greed and excess of the Catholic Church. Today, you could view St. Peter's as a monument to human greed and excess, or as a monument to deeply committed Christian faith, or as a monument to the incredible power of human ambition. But however you see it, St. Peter's Basilica is a place that is open to the public, and one that people travel from all over the world to experience with their own eyes. As opposed to, say, the Chateau Louis XIV, the most expensive home ever sold, bought by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman for $300 million in 2015. Built to mimic the aesthetic of 17th century French architecture, this house is pretty crazy. It's got a pool with rain that falls into it, I guess. Movie theater, of course. Wine cellar. Restaurant-sized kitchen. Underwater chamber you can sit inside while you reflect on your vast fortune. All surrounded by pristine, sprawling gardens. This home is probably as close as anyone could get to living in their own modern-day Versailles. The real Versailles is only a short distance away from Chateau Louis XIV. But, like St. Peter's, Versailles itself is a place the public can go visit and marvel at, whereas Chateau Louis XIV is strictly for the enjoyment of its owner and his guests. Many types of luxury are synonymous with privacy. The more money you have, the less things you need to share with other people. You can work your way up from, say, a private pool, which isn't too uncommon in many parts of America, to a private movie theater, a private tennis court, a private bowling alley, a $50 million private golf course in your backyard that only you and your friends are ever allowed to play on. Historically, the ultra-wealthy have often struck at least the semblance of a balance between creating absurdly expensive things purely for their own enjoyment and creating public works that can also be enjoyed by the average person. Andrew Carnegie was among the richest men of his day and lived lavishly, but also funded the construction of over 2,500 public libraries across the US and around the world. The Rockefellers used some of their fortune to buy up huge swaths of land so that it could be converted into national parks and preserved for future generations to enjoy. And it's not to say that today's billionaires don't invest in public works, but it does increasingly feel like the balance between money that is used philanthropically and money that is used to, say, buy a super yacht that is worth more than the Chateau Louis XIV has become rather skewed. And a lot of the philanthropy that does happen is a lot less apparent to the average person. Bill Gates, who is at this point one of the most prolific philanthropists of all time, has saved an estimated 70 million lives through his work in combating AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria across the globe. He also recently reiterated his pledge to give away virtually all of his remaining fortune by the end of his life. These are good things, but they aren't necessarily very visible to the wider public, not as visible as, say, Little Island, a floating park that hovers over the Hudson River adjacent to New York City's meatpacking district. With a price tag of roughly $260 million, Little Island was almost entirely privately funded by billionaire media mogul Barry Diller, and it is one of the most expensive parks in New York City's history. I've been to this park and it's pretty chill. I'm glad to live in a world where it exists. But just to be clear, I think saving tens of millions of people from dying of disease and pledging to give away 99% of your wealth is a better contribution to the good of humanity. It is simply a fact that all billionaires and many multimillionaires have more than enough money to make significant contributions to the public good while still being able to buy everything their hearts could possibly desire and still ensuring that they and their families are set for life. But it is also a fact that relying on the generosity of ultra-wealthy people to help balance the inequality in society is not a winning strategy. You don't have to agree with Bernie Sanders on everything to agree that the ultra-wealthy should at the very least be paying more in taxes than they currently do. And, as we all know, one of the biggest obstacles to actually doing that is that these people also wield a massive amount of political influence. The technical details of how to design a wealth tax and close all the loopholes the rich use to dodge taxes are messy and complicated. But the main problem isn't that we can't figure it out. The main problem is a lack of political will. Still, no matter what happens going forward, barring a massive seismic shift in how society is organized, luxury is here to stay. Because people like luxury. And if you are able to afford a certain level of luxury, chances are you still fantasize about the level of luxury that is just out of your reach. The Domaine de la Romanée-Conti estate in Burgundy, France is widely considered to be one of the greatest wine producers in the world. So what is it about this wine that makes someone willing to pay over $500,000 for a single bottle? With origins dating back to the early 1600s, Romanée-Conti has built up a reputation over centuries for being one of the most highly sought-after Pinot Noirs in the world. Its cultivators have honed their craft meticulously, and the region this wine comes from is considered absolutely ideal for the Pinot grape. In a good year, only a few thousand bottles are made at most. None of Romanée-Conti's wine is cheap, but the bottle that fetched $558,000 is a legendary vintage from 1945 in which only about 600 bottles were produced. Many of those have been consumed, lost, or damaged over the decades, and it is believed that today perhaps fewer than 10 still exist intact. At the record-breaking auction, 2 bottles of Romanée-Conti 1945 were sold, one for $496,000 and the other for $558,000. But can you really say that's what these bottles are worth? The adage goes that something is only worth what someone will pay for it, but the reasons why someone will pay a certain price for something becomes considerably more complicated and perhaps considerably less tethered to reality when we talk about luxury goods. When it comes to private jets with king beds and huge showers, or estates with more amenities than the finest hotels, it's not hard to understand where the price tag comes from. But expensive bottles of wine, expensive art, Grandmaster chimes, clothing, these all tap into a different aspect of luxury. When considering these items, especially the ultra-luxurious, most expensive in the world kind, there are a few key aspects to keep in mind. Extravagance, for example, taking an otherwise fairly normal object and crusting it with diamonds just because you can. Craftsmanship, the raw skill and time it takes to create a given object. Rarity, how many of these objects exist in the world. And mythos, the story and prestige that surrounds a given object. The 2.8 million Emerald Isle whiskey set is certainly extravagant. I mean, it comes with its own Fabergé egg. It's also the work of impressive craftsmanship. The whiskey inside the bottle is a 30-year-old Irish single malt, the result of a long legacy of whiskey making, carefully honing the craft to create better and better results. Only 7 of these sets were ever produced, which makes a single one exceptionally rare. And the master of whiskey who selected the specific cask this whiskey was bottled from had this to say about the selection. It was the smallest barrel we had, and it was perfect. We're talking off the chart perfect. I had it pulled from the cask immediately. It's what we call a honey cask, an ultra-rare, impeccable whiskey. It doesn't happen often, but I was lost for words and took a walk along the beach to gather my thoughts and plan out the next steps. I'm not sure if during his walk along the beach, this guy contemplated whether the whiskey would eventually be sold for $2.8 million because despite all this hyperbole and despite the impressive presentation, is it really worth that much money? It's hard to say, because the final price ultimately comes down to the mythos, the idea that whiskey represents in the mind of a buyer. The Emerald Isle was sold privately to American collector Mike Daly, and evidently he felt that was a fair price. But it wasn't without precedent because the second most expensive bottle of whiskey ever sold was right behind it at $2.7 million. The Macallan 1926 was auctioned in 2023. Only 40 bottles were produced in 1986 after being aged in sherry casks for 6 decades. And the Macallan 1926 didn't need to come in an extravagant set like the Emerald Isle. It was sold in a nice but fairly normal bottle, which means in reality this Macallan is quite a bit more valuable than the Emerald Isle on a drop-for-drop basis. Which isn't surprising because Macallans are among the most prized Scotch in the world, and Scotch is usually more highly sought after than an Irish single malt like the Emerald Isle. But all this being said, pre-auction, the Macallan 1926 was estimated to go for around 1 to 1.4 million. So at the end of the day, the final price of 2.7 million really only represents what a group of ultra-wealthy bidders, ostensibly whipped into some kind of whiskey-crazed frenzy, were willing to pay for it. Of the different characteristics that make something expensive, I find extravagance is often the least interesting. For example, the Muawad 1001 Nights Diamond Purse is a heart-shaped handbag made from 18 karat gold and covered in 4,517 diamonds, said to be the world's most valuable at $3.8 million. It looks impressive, for sure, but anything you encrust with that much gold and diamonds will look impressive and be expensive. One interesting aspect of the record-breaking Grandmaster chime that sold for $31 million is that it's made out of stainless steel, and in many ways is more understated than other Grandmaster chimes, which are usually cased in white or rose gold with far more innate engravings. The $31 million watch was the first and only Grandmaster chime produced in stainless steel, which means that rarity played a big role in its final price, along with the peerless craftsmanship that is on display in every Grandmaster chime that is produced. The world of modern art often dramatically subverts expectations about value. It's not hard to understand why the Salvator Mundi by Leonardo da Vinci sold for $450.3 million. It's a one-of-a-kind work by the most famous painter in history. What's harder to understand is Maurizio Catalan's Comedian, a single banana duct-taped to a gallery wall, a version of which recently sold for $6.2 million at auction in 2024. Justin Sun, the crypto entrepreneur who purchased the piece, ate the banana on stage shortly after buying it and proclaimed, "The real value is the concept itself." Which is a perfect encapsulation of what Comedian represents. The aspects of extravagance, craftsmanship, and rarity are virtually non-existent. Anyone can tape a banana to a wall. Its value is purely derived from the concept and the mythos that surrounds that idea. It's as much a meme or prank as it is a piece of art, but it is a very valuable meme. Contrast this with For the Love of God, a sculpture of a human skull encrusted with 8,601 flawless diamonds by Damien Hirst, valued at around $50 million. The extravagance of this piece is off the charts, but setting it in the form of a human skull brings an interesting tension, and there's absolutely no doubt it took considerable craftsmanship to build. In the present day, expensive art runs the full spectrum from absurdly simple and mundane to unbelievably complicated and lavish. There are various reasons why rich people enjoy collecting art: prestige, competition, genuine appreciation for the works and the mythos that surrounds them, but another reason is taxes and potentially money laundering. A US Senate report described the high-end art market as an ideal playing ground for money laundering thanks to the perfect storm of secrecy, shell companies, and private deals where the real buyer doesn't even have to be named. In some cases, Russian oligarchs have literally used art to move money around and dodge restrictions. This doesn't mean every abstract painting or banana taped to a wall is secretly some kind of cartel receipt. Most art sales are probably just rich people buying things they like or things that they think will go up in value. But the combination of subjective pricing and anonymous ownership does make art a very convenient place to park dirty money. At the end of the day, when you're wealthy enough that it's actually difficult to know how to spend your money, there's no real reason not to buy the most expensive version of almost everything, other than the fact that most expensive doesn't automatically translate to best in the world, and personal taste remains a factor. Still, if you want, you can wake up in the Haston's Grand Vidius bed $1 million. Then head to your kitchen and pull some espresso for my La Marzocca Strata X1, $20,000. Next, you could get dressed in a respectable Brioni suit, $10,000, or just throw on a hoodie and some designer jeans, because quiet luxury is all the rage these days, although you might as well make the hoodie a Brunello Cucinelli men's cashmere silk French terry sweatshirt, $5,000. Your chauffeur might pull up in a Bentley Flying Spur, upwards of $250,000, or the Rolls-Royce Phantom, upwards of $500,000. And finally, at the end of the day, after you've tasted a little spoonful of Almas caviar, the kind that comes in a 24-karat gold tin and can run over $30,000 a kilo, maybe, just maybe, you'll decide you'd like to wind down with a glass of original Coca-Cola. Because some things really can't be improved by being made more expensive, and deep down, there is still some part of you that's just the same as the common man. If there's any place on Earth that exemplifies all the aspects of luxury we've touched on so far, it's Billionaire's Row in New York City. Depending on your perspective, these mega-tall, super-skinny towers may be seen as awe-inspiring or as a blight on an otherwise beautiful Manhattan skyline. To build these monoliths, the developers had to purchase air rights from the surrounding buildings, giving them the legal right to build higher than zoning would normally allow. By stitching together these invisible parcels of sky, they were able to stack floor upon floor on a tiny footprint. These residences check every box. Built on some of the most rare and valuable real estate on Earth, they afford a view of Central Park that virtually no one else gets to experience. The craftsmanship needed to design and build these towers is undeniably impressive, and the prestige and mythos that surrounds them writes itself. Living here elevates you to a godlike throne that hovers above the peasants in the city below. And should you choose to leave your spire, the entire ultra-rich playground of New York City's world-class restaurants and high-end shopping awaits just minutes away. However, all is not perfect in paradise. Some of these towers have now faced lawsuits, with residents complaining about leaks, flooding, elevator failures, creaking and swaying in the wind, and a trash chute that makes it sound like a bomb is detonating. Problems that could be deal breakers in any apartment building, let alone one where you've paid $20 million or more for a unit. In what could be seen as a fitting metaphor, the famous 432 Park Tower's exterior has become literally riddled with tiny cracks. The last time I visited New York, I took this picture from Central Park, and I found myself asking the question, should these exist? Certainly there are many New Yorkers who would say no, but I found myself feeling strangely neutral. Simply because, for better or for worse, they do exist, and demolishing them seems like it would be extremely difficult, if not impossible. So unless some structural flaws ultimately prove so severe that they are taken down by nature itself, one imagines they will continue to stand for years to come as monuments to something. I might tell myself that if I was to spend all those millions on a place to live, I'd rather my estate be set in beautiful nature than encased in a concrete jungle. But then I remember that the people who live on Billionaire's Row, of course, own houses both in the city and the country and all across the world. And if they don't own a house in the given place, they can simply rent a top-of-the-line villa. To them, it's all a playground. The inevitable question that all this leads us to is, can luxury make you happy? Lots has been written about what happiness actually means and whether humans can ever truly be happy, and that is not the focus of this video. But I believe money absolutely can buy certain kinds of happiness. Whether that happiness is long-lasting, and whether it runs into diminishing returns once you hit a certain level of wealth are important questions, but Unless you've cultivated an impressive non-attachment to material things, there's almost certainly something you can buy that will make you happy. Especially because there is another important aspect of luxury I haven't talked about. The luxury of time. While most people have to clean their own house, cook their own meals, fold their own laundry, sort through finances, and plan their own vacations, the wealthy can simply pay other people to do these chores for them. Maybe you don't feel like more and more expensive stuff would bring you happiness, and that's probably the right instinct to have. But surely more and more time to do the things you most enjoy would. Of course, a life of pure leisure is not necessarily a goal to aspire to. Working hard and being challenged are important aspects of life that make the free time you actually do get more rewarding. How wealthy people navigate this will depend on the person. Many ultra-wealthy have worked hard to get where they are and continue to work hard to maintain their status. But others are trust funders who may have never worked a day in their entire lives. Perhaps in the future, if predictions of AI replacing the majority of human workers comes true, we will all have to grapple with what life is like with vastly more leisure time available to us. Provided, of course, a system to fairly distribute wealth is put in place and we manage to avoid an absolute economic apocalypse. You could say that the ultimate luxury the ultra-wealthy have is freedom. The freedom to buy whatever they want, to go and live wherever they want, the freedom to work as hard or as little as they want, the freedom to use their money to shape the world to their whims, either for the good of humanity or simply their own personal desires. We should strive to create a world that is more equal, but also understand that human civilization has never been equal. It has always been dominated by hierarchies, by kings, by gods, and even if we do evolve past that mode of being someday, we'll still have these unfathomable relics of luxury to marvel at.